This session is about to begin.
Good evening. Welcome to the monthly online session of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. If you are viewing our channel for the first time, I request you to please click the bell icon and subscribe to our channel. Then you will be able to listen to all our recordings of wonderful conversations that we've been holding for the past 3 years. And not only that, you will also have access to our annual festival recordings as well. So please do it. The Hyderabad Literary Festival has environment as one of its main thrusts. In every festival, we do have a prominent part given to discussions on environment. And therefore, we are very delighted to be hosting this session along with Marg, the publishers of this wonderful book, The Story of India's Cheetahs. The story of India's cheetahs is an enigma to the people in India, and it is often confused with the leopard. Few know the difference between a leopard and a cheetah, and very few know the life of a cheetah. This work traces the cheetah from prehistoric times through history to its ultimate extinction in the Indian subcontinent in the 20th century, and the cheetah's arrival from Africa in our effort to bring back a lost species. The author, Dr. Divyabhanusinh, has painstakingly traced the animal in prehistoric cave paintings, in coins, and in Sanskrit, classical Greek and Latin records, Persian, Urdu, Marathi, and Hindi literature, lexicons, Indian paintings, and photographs. It is the only comprehensive work ever written to date on the cheetah in Asia. Our author, Dr. Divyabhanusinh, is a past president of Worldwide Fund for Nature, India, WWF. He is a past vice president of the Bombay Natural History Society, BNHS, and a member of the cat specialist group, Species Survival Commission, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN SSC. He was a member of the National Board for Wildlife from 2008 to 2013, and its standing committee, the highest advisory body for the government of India. He was a member of the expert group which drafted India's National Wildlife Action Plan 2017-2031, and also of the Government of India's Cheetah Task Force for the Animals Reintroduction. Welcome, Dr. Divyabhanusinh. Talking to him is Professor Raman Sukumar, who is a National Science Chair at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He is internationally known for his pioneering research on the ecology, behavior, and conservation of Asian elephants. His work has covered topics as varied as elephant-human interactions, reproductive biology, molecular genetics, evolutionary history, population dynamics, landscape ecology, movement ecology, and the cultural history of elephants. His research interests also extend to tropical forest ecology and climate change. Before I hand over the session, I would like to say a word of thanks to Professor Sukumar for having agreed despite his multiple, a very busy, hectic schedule as of the moment. Now, I think it is over to you, Professor Sukumar, for the elephant to talk to the cheetah.
Good evening, everyone, especially my very good friend, Dr. Divyabhanusinh. I still recollect the trip that we made to the Gir forest together some years ago, to watch the lion on which you have written a wonderful book. And but the subject of today's talk is, of course, the cheetah, which has been in the news recently for a variety of different reasons. But this is not something that we will discuss. We will not start on that note. We will come to that perhaps at the end. But what I find remarkable is that more than 3 decades ago, you had written a book, The End of a Trail, and this was about the cheetah. And this was even at that time, it was a unique book, because to the best of my knowledge, that's the only book on the cheetah that anybody has written, or anything substantial on the cheetah has been written by anybody. I mean, I don't even find scientific papers or articles about the cheetah. And you did this 3.5 decades ago. And you have followed it up with, a substantially revised edition of that book, which is now called The Story of Asia's Elephants, and bringing the story up to date and so on. I just wonder if you could share with the viewers the circumstances that made you write a book on an extinct species. Writing about the lion or writing about the elephant or the tiger is something I can understand. But what made you write a book on an extinct species more than 3 decades ago?
Thank you, Dr. Sukumar. Very kind of you to introduce me with such glowing words. I don't think I deserve them. But coming to the point, in 1984, my predecessor at WWF was the Maharaja of Baroda, Fateh Singh Rao. He wrote a letter to Mrs. Gandhi, then Prime Minister, to say that why do we want to introduce cheetahs from Iran? Because there were no cheetahs in India, and we are wasting our time. And this is strange because his own great-grandfather and his grandfather had cheetahs from India, and they were coursing blackbuck within Baroda state with cheetahs. The Minister for Environment at that time was known to me, in fact, a cousin of mine. And he passed on the paper to me to see, because he knew my interest in history. He said, look, why don't you write something about it? So I wrote a small paper and I called it a tentative position paper. And then things started going out of hand insofar as Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated and cheetah was forgotten. But at that time, IUCN Species Survival Commission CAT group was meeting in Ghana, where the Ministry of Environment passed on my paper to the group while they were discussing cats in general. Now, this paper was never meant to be published or discussed in this manner. It was for internal circulation for the Prime Minister and the Environment Minister's use and nothing more. Then two things happened, which I insist can happen only in India. People started writing to me as Dr. Divyabhanusinh. Well, I didn't have a doctorate at the time, but they assumed that anybody who writes on a subject like this must be a doctor. And then I became a cheetah expert without ever having seen a cheetah in my life. This can happen only in this country. And I enjoyed my notoriety, I must confess, for a while. But then I said, well, this doesn't work. So I started looking at historical records, paintings, coins, prehistoric drawings, and so on. I sat with experts of Sanskrit and Pali and classical Greek and Latin and Persian and so on. And it took me 10 years to write the book. And I published that first book, which you mentioned, in 1995. And then later on, I went, of course, several times to Africa to see the subject of my research in the wild. And then I wrote to my University of Pune, and they awarded me a D.Litt for it. So finally, I became a doctor and something of an expert on the history of cheetah, if not its ecology. That's the background of it. And then what happened was that during the COVID period recently, I was really doing nothing except for sweeping the floor of the house and helping my wife to cook food and things. And I came across a remarkable Russian author, a field zoologist working in Masai Mara, Chelisheva. Elena Chelisheva. And she said, well, Dr. Singh, why the hell don't you do something with your book? So I said, okay, fine, I'm doing nothing. So I got down to revising the whole book and then updated it. And that's the new avatar of the present book.
Excellent. So actually the journey to bring the cheetah back to India is a journey that began a long time ago. It's not something recent. But of course, this is, we'll sort of come back to this towards the end of our conversation this evening. See, in the meantime, there have been suggestions. There's a book by the Thapars, for instance, suggesting that the cheetah was not native to India. The cheetah sort of came in more recent historical times and so on. And, so why is it that, are we giving so much of importance today to introduce the cheetah into the country? And you have countered that in your book, by beginning with, images of rock art from Central India, in which you differentiate between the leopard and the cheetah and so on and so forth on the basis of some of the paintings that you get, I have myself researched some of these paintings, obviously for the elephant, and you have done it for the cats. And these rock art are actually about 4,000 years before present. and Neolithic and maybe the early Iron Age or whatever. I'm just wondering, if you look at the cheetah figure in one of those that you interpret as most probably a cheetah, you see that your description of the legs, how conclusive it is that it's really a cheetah. Okay. Now the legs are slender, as you said, but if you look at the body is bulky and the body is large. So given that there could be a certain amount of artistic license in the way people are depicting leopards and cheetahs or whatever else, in rock art, how conclusive would the rock art evidence be? Yeah, the cheetah was there 4,000 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Let me tell you two things on this. Yes, the legs are very spindly and very thin like that of a cheetah. Its tail is very long, unlike that of a leopard, if you see. Okay. Then the withers, the position of the withers, the arched back, and a very small head, which gives it away. What is really different is the huge body which has been depicted. But when you compare it with the prehistoric art of a leopard, which I have published in the book, then you say, hey, this has got to be a cheetah, it cannot be something else. That, at any rate, was also the conclusion, not just my conclusion, but the pioneer of rock art painting, Wakankar and Brooks, when they published their work, they also called it a cheetah. And then when I compared it with the rendition of a leopard, I was convinced that, look, this has to be a cheetah and it cannot be something else. Even the spots on the leopard are very differently made from the spots on the cheetah of the Karwai painting, which I have published in the book.
I was also wondering, do you get in the Harappan seals? Is there any cheetah by any chance? I was just wondering.
There is only one seal which apparently has been lost now. It was in Pakistan, where it is a seal of a what I call a composite animal, but its body had spots exactly like that of a cheetah. Now, I'm not going to be brave enough to say that it was a cheetah. It was some kind of a composite animal. But we haven't seen cheetahs on Mohenjo-daro Harappan seals at all. We have seen, of course, tigers, we've seen gharial, we've seen other animals. But no, there are no cheetahs there, at least not as far as I know.
Yeah, that's probably not surprising, given that cheetahs anyhow exist at very, very low densities.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore, the probability of sighting cheetahs, even in ancient times, would have been pretty low.
Yeah.
Right. I'll just go on to your the descriptions in the ancient Greek sources, such as Pliny the Elder, of differences between these terms, the pardos and pantheras and so on, and what one leopard, one term refers to the leopard, other term refers to the cheetah, perhaps, and possibility of confusion and that and so on. I was wondering if you could elaborate, on this aspect.
Right. See, the ancient the ancient Romans, like us Indians today, always confused between the cheetah and the leopard. When the cheetahs used to be brought for great functions into ancient Rome, they used to be popularly called pantheras. Now, pantheras can be a leopard and a cheetah. So what really happens in these records, you see, throughout history is that you see a word, but you cannot say, okay, this is definitely the case until you see some kind of behavior. So when you see Strabo, for instance, describing the procession when a king anoints his hair in India, then buffaloes, leontes, lions, and pardalis walk into the procession. Now, you would appreciate that no self-respecting leopard is going to walk in a procession, but cheetahs would. Similarly, you come to them. Now, this was around the time of Emperor Tiberius, means at the beginning of the Common Era. 150 years when you come to Claudius Alienus, he writes that Indians bring to their kings four-horned oryxes and tame pantheras. Okay, now four-horned oryxes, we all know, is the four-horned antelope of India, which is endemic to this country. And again, tame pantheras would not be panthers, but it would be cheetahs, because panthers you can tame, but they would not be taken regularly to the kings. Also, there is another passage, where I think Claudius Alienus mixes up lions and cheetahs, and he says that lions are used for hunting antelope and so on. So these kind of references, you have to really look at the behavior of the cheetah, of the animal, and before you can identify anything.
So all this kind of sort of points to the fact that even though there is a possibility of confusion between leopards and cheetahs, that many of these references, rock art and so on, are actually cheetahs and not leopards. And I really appreciate what he said about behavior, because our knowledge of animal behavior can help us differentiate, distinguish, the identity of a species. Certainly. Now, coming to our sources within India and other Sanskrit sources, you again have pointed out similar difficulties in identifying leopards and cheetahs, and you very clearly mentioned that the word Chitraka, for instance, points to a cheetah, refers to a cheetah. Again, could you illuminate us about how the possible confusion between leopards and cheetahs, and the word Chitraka, how it refers to a cheetah and not a leopard in the Sanskrit sources and so on. That perhaps for our viewers, if you could elaborate on that point.
Sure. See, the Chitraka means a dappled one. Now, we have basically two major Chitrakas in India. One is, of course, the cheetah, and the other is the cheetah, the spotted deer. Now, again, you have to look at what I would call other circumstances around this word whenever it appears. For instance, in the Ramayana, Ram is inviting Sita to look at Chitrakas which are spotting in the field. Now, I'm sure Ram is not calling Sita to look at cats, but they are obviously deer, cheetah. But when you look at, for instance, the Amar Kosh, which is the earliest Sanskrit lexicon of between 4th century and 6th century of the Common Era, he describes what are called the animals of the Sinha tribe and calls them the Panchanakhas, the 5-clawed ones. What does he say there? He says there is a Sinha, lion, there is a Vyagra, a tiger, Dvipin, which is a leopard, and a Chitraka. Now, when he's using other large cats, you cannot say that this is referring to the deer. Right. Then you see also, for instance, when you look at Someshwara III, Someshwara III was the Chalukya king at Kalyani. And if you see his Manasolasa, which is a compendium of the kind of sports which were in use at the time of his reign, which is in the 12th century, 1130 of the Common Era. He's talking about hunting with dogs, hunting with hunting fish. He's talking of hunting with, or rather, he's talking of falconry and Austringerism. And he's using, he describes 30 different methods of hunting deer. Okay, Mrigya Vinoda, he calls them. And in one of them, he says there is something called Vyagraja Mrigya. That means hunting with tigers. But when he describes the hunting with tigers, he is saying that you can tame a Chitraka and then make him run after and hunt for you a Krishnasara. Now here is again behavior. All right, it has Chitraka. It cannot be a spotted deer. It cannot be a leopard. It's got to be a cheetah. So this is the way I try to trace the existence of the cheetah through the ages, and I'm hitting at the high spots. There are many other small references also which talk of the Chitraka and which talk of some kind of behavior or some kind of environment. For instance, in Abhignan Shakuntalam, the king goes, Dushyant goes to hunt Chitraka. Now, obviously, he's not hunting cheetahs, he's hunting the
cheetah. Excellent. In fact, the Manasolasa, I mean, there has a lot of references to the elephant, which is my favorite animal.
Yes.
And I gleaned a lot of interesting information about elephant distributions and changes over time, and the way that you need to manage the elephant forests and so on from the Manasolasa. But again, coming back to the cheetah, would you say that this is the time when you have, for the first time, you have evidence that the cheetah is being used as a coursing animal? This is around the 12th century or whatever. Would that be by the Hindu rulers, the Hindu court? Would this be the earliest, or are there earlier references to that?
See, okay, I'll put it to you this way: if this is the most elaborate reference to hunting with cheetahs, was Claudius Arianus referring to hunting with cheetahs when he said lions are being used? I don't know. Possible, but I won't swear by it.
India. I'm talking about in India, for instance.
I'm talking of India, because he's talking of India.
Okay.
Claudius Arianus is talking about India, that Indians train lions to hunt animals. Okay. Now, Indians didn't train lions to hunt, but they probably trained cheetahs then, which is 150 AD. Also, if Strabo and Aryan talk about falconry. And if by that time the elephant has already been tamed and used, because it says that a person of importance uses an elephant and the others use horses, and there are all kinds of statements in Aryan and Strabo and all his fellows, then I would like to ask that why did Indians then tame cheetahs if they walked in processions? Weren't they just ornaments? Could be. Like, for instance, in ancient Egypt, cheetahs were definitely tamed, but I don't think they used them for hunting. There is no record. So you're quite right. This is perhaps the earliest reference, detailed reference or identifiable reference of hunting with cheetahs, coursing with cheetahs.
So then, we come to the Mughal period when, this is sort of established practice, using the cheetah as a coursing animal and hunting, and the descriptions. There are all the Mughal miniatures, the paintings, and, you have referred to a lot of these and, wonderfully illustrated your book with these paintings and so on. I'm just wondering, without getting into the art history of the cheetah in the Mughal period and so on, I'm just wondering, what is the kind of impact that this made? If the offtake of cheetahs, obviously the historical process of decline of the cheetah is something that didn't happen overnight. It was a long drawn process. So I was wondering, during the Mughal period, very specifically, what is the nature of the change in either the distribution of the cheetah or in their abundances? Could have happened because, cheetah was probably a very commonly used as a coursing animal.
See, even before the Mughals come on the scene, if you look at the Delhi Sultanate records, there are quite a lot of records to say that cheetahs were being used for hunting. They used to go out and say, so-and-so went out during Sultana Razia's time. Her noblemen were hunting with cheetahs. Firoz Shah Tughlaq's Shikar Khana records say that in his menagerie, there were so many cheetahs and caracals, siagosh, that you couldn't count them. Now, by the time you come to the Mughals, the cheetahs have already started being taken from the wild in large numbers for God knows how many hundreds of years, if not thousands, hundreds of years before the Mughals arrived. But with the coming of the Mughals, two things happen. For the first time in the history of North India, at any rate, you have a plethora of paintings. Now, these paintings come about because Mughals required a lot of paper to maintain that empire and for communication. And secondly, paintings also came into their own because Humayun came with painters from Iran. And Akbar very probably had dyslexia, so he couldn't read or write. So when he wanted to understand what is happening around him, he commissioned a huge number of painters. So two things happened: availability of paper and Akbar's propensity to look at paintings. Now, both these made the cheetah into a central figure at court because there were, Jahangir says that during during his father's time, at one point of time, he had 1,000 cheetahs. And this is also corroborated by Fitch, who says that I went to the king's menagerie and I saw so many hundreds of cheetahs, or whatever words that he used at that time, and lions and God knows what else. At that time, the Brits couldn't differentiate between a lion or a cheetah, so there cannot have been 1,000 lions. But he said that I saw hundreds of cats and so on. So in 49 years, Iqbal Nama, another record of his reign, says he was responsible for taking out 9,000 cheetahs in 49 years of his reign. Now, obviously, this had
9,000 cheetahs.
9,000 cheetahs. That's the figure. And Jahangir himself says that during my father's reign, he had 1,000 cheetahs in his menagerie at one time. Abul Fazl says that there were Khasa cheetahs, and there were 30 of them which were always kept at court, but there were second-grade cheetahs and third-grade cheetahs and fourth-grade cheetahs. And they've just discovered the archaeological survey calls it leopard stables in Fatehpur Sikri. And they're not leopard stables, they're cheetah stables. So what was happening during the Mughal period is that very large numbers of cheetahs were being taken out from the wild. So it was a continuing process. It didn't start with the Mughals, but it was a continuing process. Remember one thing, cheetahs were not an object of hunting. They were objects of taking them from the wild so that they could hunt with them. They were not trophies, as the lion was for the Mughals, for instance. Right. Lion was royal game. So it enhances the process. And Jahangir is very clear. Raja Bir Singh Dev brings a white cheetah to show him. He had never seen a white cheetah in his life. And he says, well, I've never seen a cheetah. The spots on these cheetahs tend to be bluish. Neela dash, he says in Persian. And then he says, I've never seen a white cheetah in my life. And I have seen the following birds and animals which have been white. So he knew exactly what these guys were doing. He was experimenting with, once the cheetah catches from the neck, it has a very small mouth. So it tries to strangulate its kill. Now, the Mughals, being Muslims, they had to perform halal to make it permissible meat to eat. So there had to be a process by which you had to get the cheetah to give up its hold on the neck so that halal could be performed. So Jahangir performs an experiment of saving these the black buck and keeping them in front of his tent. And he says for 24 hours, nothing happened. But afterwards, they were so traumatized that they started behaving funnily and they died in spite of my having given them opium. So, I mean, they knew exactly what these guys were doing with the cheetahs. But yes, and there was a huge bureaucracy which came up, and right up to Aurangzeb's time, cheetahs were being taken primarily from the Deccan and from what you call Gujarat. See, the Mughals, if you see their records, they differentiate between 3 types of cheetahs. Cheetah of the Deccan, which they say was very small. Cheetah of Gujarat and present-day Rajasthan, which was the best because it hunted very well. And that's the reason is they're from the desert. Also, they said these are the largest cheetahs, and that also is very clear because the biggest black buck anywhere recorded, if you look at Roland Ward's records, are from Gujarat and Rajasthan.
Gujarat, right.
Right? So the cheetah had to be big to be able to negotiate that black buck. And he said the worst animals, the worst cheetahs for coursing are the cheetahs of the mountains. That means from Afghanistan, because they didn't course. They probably hunted in mountainous areas. So he said, don't get those, get these Gujarat chaps, So they knew exactly what they were doing.
Right. And just a brief question in terms of the numbers, as an ecologist, sometimes I wonder, was it possible that such numbers could be taken from the wild, within short time periods? And are these exaggerations or are they, real numbers or whatever, Same thing, similar doubts have been expressed about the numbers of elephants in the armies of ancient kings, for instance. Yeah. And I've argued like Jahangir's time, 9,000 elephants, were there, captive elephants were there in the Mughal Empire. So just a brief thought about these numbers, 9,000 or whatever.
See, my own view is on this, that it could have been an exaggeration, all right? But if it was not 1,000 animals, surely there were a few hundred of them around, If it not 9,000 animals in 49 years that Akbar took, then surely he must have taken a few hundred of them out of those areas. See, why does forget the Mughals, but why does Firoz Shah Tughlaq's man say that there were so many cheetahs in Karakal that you can't count them? He doesn't give a figure. So what I'm saying is that there were perhaps, and look, when you talk of the Mughal Empire, you are talking right up to Hyderabad and Afghanistan. Right? And right up to, of course, in Bengal, you didn't have cheetahs, but right up to Bihar, the Mughal Empire was there. So, and right up to Balochistan on the other side. So it was a huge area. So while the concentration of cheetahs may not have been there to the extent that perhaps tigers were in the jungles, or leopards better still. But yes, there may have been some exaggeration, but I would only say that very large numbers of cheetahs were taken for hundreds of years, even before the Mughals, and the Mughals carried it to a fine art.
Okay. You state in your book that by the 1920s, the cheetah becomes very rare in the subcontinent. And that is, of course, the period of British rule here in India. And I'm wondering what their role was, And the British, of course, also used the cheetah again as a hunting animal. So, by the time, the cheetah populations would have come down substantially. Yeah. But what is the role of the British in its decline,
See, we have done this analysis. I did it with Raza Kazmi, and I published it in the book. Between 1772 between 1772 and 1997. Now, when I talk of India, I talk of the Indian subcontinent because it's a political difference, Pakistan and India. It's not an ecological difference. If you look at the whole area, we found only 300 and some odd number of cheetahs, which were actually counted or killed or painted or shot or paid for as a bounty, or 425 or 475. So it's that very small number of cheetahs that you find between 1772 and 1997. The last cheetahs seen in Balochistan was in 1997. The British really, if you see, make cheetah the object of a trophy to be hunted. I'm not suggesting that the Indian princes and the Mughals did not hunt. Maybe they did, but it was never an object of their hunt like the tiger was or a leopard was or a lion was. These were royal game. And that's why they protected them, because they were royal game. They wouldn't allow anyone else to shoot. For the Indian princes, be they Muslim or Hindu or any other, for them, the cheetah was something to be caught from the wild. The British started hunting them, spearing them from horseback in places. So I would say that while the cheetahs were nearly well on their way to extinction before the British came, they gave the final push, which did the trend. And they also paid for killing cheetahs and paid bounty as they paid bounties for leopards and tigers, which was never the case in Indian India, or never the case with the Indian princes, until Indian princes started aping the British and started shooting cheetahs.
I understand, but I was wondering because, the cheetah was never a man-eater. So what was the real need to sort of pay bounty for the hunting of cheetahs, is something. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, but we'll kind of move on in the interest of time. And, December 1947 is a momentous month. I don't know the exact date when the Maharaja Pratap Singh, Dev of Korea district of present-day Chhattisgarh, shot 3 male cheetahs. And, the early accounts suggested that with that, the cheetah became extinct. And your research shows that not necessarily so, that cheetahs still perhaps survived, through the 1960s and even into the mid-1970s. This is what you have written in your book. You have provided some evidence for it. So I'm wondering how important that shooting of the 3 male cheetahs was, for the extinction of the species in our country. Did it matter at all if he had not encountered those 3 male cheetahs and not shot them? What would have happened to the cheetah? This is all speculation, but were the female cheetahs around? And obviously there were, because they were around in the 1960s and 70s. But a lot has been made out about this, the infamous shooting of the 3 male cheetahs.
Yeah, well, my view is I wish he hadn't done it. But frankly, by the time you come to 1947, the cheetahs are all finished anyway. I mean, if you find 2 references in 1960 and 1 reference in 1970 and 2-3 references in 1997, they were not going to be breeding anyway. And yes, I wish he hadn't shot them. When he shot the 3, the mother escaped. There was a mother also. But what can we say? If he had not shot them, would they have survived? I have my doubts, frankly. I really have my doubts, because the matter had gone too far by then. See, between 1772 and 1997, we find only 300 to 400 cheetahs being accounted for. Why did the Indian princes start importing African cheetahs? If there were cheetahs, so many of them hanging around, and they needed cheetahs for hunting blackbuck in their kingdoms, why did they have to start importing cheetahs from about 1914 onwards? So, the British gave perhaps the push, but even if they hadn't given the push, I don't think the cheetah would have survived the British rule. I don't think so. And I wouldn't blame the British solely for it.
Right.
Or for that matter, the Maharaja who shot them.
Okay. That's an important point to make, because I will now shift gear and sort of go on to something somewhat more technical, and sort of bring in genetics and molecular genetics and so on into our discussion. And you also referred to some of these studies. I remember reading a paper many, many years ago, a few decades ago. I think it came from the lab of Steve O'Brien, which showed that the African cheetah had very low genetic variation. This is when the science of conservation biology was sort of blossoming and all that. And this is given as an example of a natural constriction of a wild population of a species, because of natural events, the glacial events during the interglacial events during the Pleistocene, The earth became colder and then became warmer and so on.
Yeah.
So, and this bottleneck happened something like 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. So the cheetah is deep operate in genetic variation, and it creates a whole lot of other issues for its survival and extinction, viability or non-viability, and all of that. Then after that, you took the initiative. You collected some samples and museum specimens or whatever, sent them to the lab of David Woodruff, and he made a comparison between the this is essentially the mitochondrial DNA, which gives you only the matrix. It's a very tiny part of the genetic material in our cells, the mitochondrial DNA. And he said that there is absolutely no difference between the African cheetah and the Indian cheetah in terms of mitochondrial DNA variation or whatever. And and he said confidently that you can introduce the cheetah in India. And the more recent genetic studies that you have referred to in your recent book show clear genetic differentiation between different subspecies of the cheetah.
Yes.
Different subspecies of the cheetah. Okay, all that's the kind of some genetic work has been done. They have still not covered the bulk of the DNA which is there in our nucleus. The nuclear DNA has not been. I don't know if anybody has done it or not. I'm not aware of it. But at the end of that chapter, you make a statement. It's unfortunate that this fact that there is genetic differentiation among different subspecies has been used as an argument for not introducing African cheetah into India. And this was not done by any Indian biologist or conservationist. It was done by, I think, made by the scientists from the West who actually did these genetic studies.
Yes.
I'm wondering why you made that comment about unfortunate argument for not introducing the cheetah into India.
See, I tell you, whatever information I have of cheetahs, which, according to me, about 200 cheetahs were brought in by the Indian princes between 1918 and 1945 or 42 or 40, just before the Second World War. My own sense is that 200 cheetahs came. Now, if you look at these cheetahs who came, they were treated exactly like Indian cheetahs. There was no difference of different way of handling them. There was no difference in training them. There was no difference in even treating them. You see, as you would know very well, our own science of medicine died with the British coming in and bringing in allopathy at the cost of traditional medicines. There are one of the lexicons which I have, but I have not mentioned it in detail in the book, talks of several different kinds of ailments that cheetahs suffer and the medicines that are used for that. Now, those medicines were also the same that they were using for Indian cheetahs. And these cheetahs came from Mombasa to Mumbai, all right? They came in a choppy sea journey after 15 days without any tranquilizers, without any antibiotics. So God knows what condition they came in. And yet the Indians were able to train them as they would train an Indian cheetah. So as far as I'm concerned, now I'm not talking, I'm not a molecular biologist, or I'm not a field zoologist, but the point is all the indications that we have would suggest that these cheetahs were actually, in fact, no different in terms of behavior to the African fellows. They were happily hunting black buck. Why? I mean, they forgot their Thompson's gazelle or Grant's gazelle or whatever back home, but they were happily hunting black buck. They were happily hunting. You see, if you look at Saidnamai Nigarin, which is from Ajaygarh in central India, cheetahs were trained to hunt cheetal, for instance. And it would be done by a coalition. Trained to hunt sambar male, again with a coalition. And present cheetahs who have come from Africa happily hunting cheetal, and one of them even went out and hunted a black buck. So that's why I'm saying that it is unfortunate that this is used as an argument to say, look, these guys are different. Okay, fine, they are different, but different to what extent? Also there is IUCN guideline. If the government of India, or if I as a member had suggested something which was contrary to IUCN guidelines, that would be a different ballgame. Then we would say, fine, hold it. We don't want to do it. But if it is within IUCN guidelines, and if you find that basically there was, at least my researchers tell me that there was no different way of handling the African cheetah, why would they not be brought in? That's the way I look at it.
Right. Excellent. I think that makes a lot of sense. Dr. Divyabhanusinh, you have been a very strong advocate for the reintroduction of the cheetah in India. And you have been a part of the Cheetah Task Force. Many years ago that was set up. And the committee that was set up by the Indian government or NTCA, for preparing the action plan or plan.
That's right. Yeah.
An action plan and so on and so forth. And finally, of course, the cheetah has come to India. It's a reality. So we had 20 cheetahs that have come to India. I was wondering, my first question is that even before the individuals came, even before the cheetahs were brought to India, there was vehement opposition, from certain people and certain sections of conservationists and so on. And I was wondering, why do you think there was so much opposition to it? The genetic argument, I understand that genetic argument, but I think the arguments went much beyond that. And I was wondering, is there any rational logic or whatever for opposing it, even before the animals were brought into the country? And given the history of African cheetahs having been brought to India, of course, not released into the wild, but pretty much their behavior and other attributes are very similar to what we had in India prior to their extinction.
Well, you see, my own view is that I think the whole program has not been properly understood by the people at large. One. Point number two, we are all tiger-centric, We want to save the tiger. It's a good thing. Why the hell would we not want to save the tiger? I have a feeling that a lot of people who objected to cheetahs coming to India and who made all kinds of statements in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually went to the extent of saying that it's illegal to bring cheetahs in 2013. And then in 2019, the larger bench overruled that statement and all that. The whole thing is, I think there was a feeling of being left out, out of a lot of people felt that who the hell is going to be listening if cheetahs come here and they hog the limelight, as indeed they are doing right now. So, for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But I think it was more of a, if you like to put it crudely, jealousy more than anything else. I can't think of any scientific reason why cheetahs should not have been brought in, which were aired in the cheetahs are different. Somebody said that if there is a degree of 2 degrees difference between Africa and India, the cheetahs will die. Now, we don't know. These 8 cheetahs which have died, we don't know whether they died because of the 2 degrees difference or whatever. So to me, these objections were purely, what do I say? They were for personal feeling that, look, we are going to be left out of the limelight and somebody else is taking the limelight. This is my view. I may be totally wrong, but this is
one of the arguments that people gave was that a lot of money is being put into cheetah reintroduction. And there'll be less money for the tiger or whatever else. But would you say that there is already sufficient money for the tiger and therefore it's not an argument at all?
Okay, fine. No, I'll answer that one. See, there are 2 things. It was not a zero-sum game. Cheetah money was not to be taken from what tiger preservation was or lion preservation or elephant or rhino or whatever. This was a whole new project, one. Point number 2, the government of India are not spending this money. It's coming from Indian oil. This entire cheetah project is, as far as I know, is being funded by Indian oil. Now, government of India's resources have not. Now, you can say that Indian oil is government of India's thing and therefore it's in government's money. But Indian oil was not protecting tigers or lions or rhinos or elephants or whatever. So that argument to me just doesn't hold water at all. And why should it be? If you are spending so much money, why are you sending Chandrayaan to the moon? We don't have to do it, yeah? We can say that, look, let's use that money for poverty elevation.
Right. Okay, Dr. Divyabhanusinh, I'll come to my last question.
Sure.
And this is, since you wrote your book, a wonderful book, I enjoyed, I have not read it in great detail, but depth, which I do, at the earliest opportunity, but I've sort of gone through all the chapters. When you wrote the book, obviously all the recent experiences after the 20 cheetahs came into the country, you didn't have the benefit of what happened to these cheetahs after they were brought in. And there have been these 8 deaths that you just now referred to and so on. And various other, learning experiences that we have had. I was wondering, would you have anything different to say, anything new to say, any advice to give? Whether people take it or not is a different question. But that's a different matter. But would you say, and you can, spend the next few minutes just telling us, your thoughts about
Sure.
Sure. On this matter, so that, see, everyone, when you have started on a given project, I mean, I would think that we want it to succeed. We don't want things to fail.
Yeah.
Obviously. So.
Okay. It's unfortunate that our attention has been taken by these 8 deaths of the cheetahs. Now, let's analyze what those deaths are. Now, look, let's be very clear. I'm not a spokesman for the government of India, and I have my own reservations about what is happening there. But look at one particular animal came sick, all right? And it had a kidney problem and it died. We know that for a fact. Then we were told one animal died in some internecine warfare. Now, this could happen anywhere in the world, all right? That is 2. Third animal was supposed to have died of a snake bite. Now, I don't know. I'm not saying that this happened, but that's what one had read in the papers. That could happen anywhere else in the world. Then the 4th animal died of what happened to that one, this collar business, which has been talked of. So, okay, if these reasons are correct, then you cannot blame just the management on it per se. Secondly, 3 cubs died of the cheetah. But this is nothing new. If you look at
natural mortality.
It's a natural mortality. And we are lucky that 1 cub is still alive. And we'll be very lucky if it becomes full grown. So these are the things. So I don't think we should unnecessarily be criticizing the government. What are the shortcomings are somewhere else. Now, let me make this statement by using a caveat. I was a member of the Cheetah Task Force in 2010 and continued to be so till about 2013-14, when we identified 4 or 5 places where cheetahs could be brought in, and detailed reports were to be made of all these 4 or 5 locations before cheetahs would be brought in. By that time, I was out of the cheetah project. So my knowledge and what I'm saying is entirely on what is in public domain. What is bothering me, Noah, and frankly, is that, you would know this better than I do. The forest department are managers. They manage things, all right? It's like saying in a hospital, the nurses manage a disease. But who identifies the disease? It's the expert, the doctor. Now, if you have experts from Africa who came here, then those guys should have been kept here on a long-term basis and understudies put under them who are not prone to transfers every 3 or 4 years, like say perhaps people from Wildlife Institute of India or whatever, so that they would become cheetah experts. Now, those guys pushed off from what I can hear and what Adrian Tordif is saying, that we are prepared to help, but we are sitting somewhere else. Today, I read somewhere in the papers. Now, if you do this kind of thing, one guy who knew more about cheetahs of Africa in India than anyone else, I think, was Y.V. Jhala. So why did he have to go? I don't know. So if this kind of disjointed actions are taken, then you are going to have problems. There's no question about it. Again, I say, the specialist's job is to identify a problem and suggest a solution. It is for the forest department to carry out the solution. If the forest department understands this basic thing, then we are on a win-win situation. Where will this go? I personally think we are going to make a success of it for only one reason. And that reason is because the Prime Minister himself has taken interest in it. So the bureaucracy hopefully will bend over backwards, and as the American saying goes, they will circle the wagons and do something about it. And I hope they bring back those experts from Africa, 2, 3, 4, as many of them are required, and then use them to say, hey, what's happening here? Also, lots of steps were to be taken in these proposed sites, where cheetahs were supposed to move to Noradehi, Ghasidas Sanctuary, Gandhi Sagar Sanctuary, Mukundra Sanctuary. Now, whether they have been taken, not taken, I am not aware. But if they have been taken, then I think you can make a success of it. Also, Dr. Sukumar, I'd like to put something in a different perspective. In 1952, the Chief Minister of Assam wrote to the Prime Minister of India to say rhinos are practically extinct in India, in Assam. Today, you have 4,000 rhinos, all right? 50 years down the line. Yeah, in 1972, when Project Tiger started, we did not know one end of a tranquilizer gun from another. Today, whether you accept the figure or not, there are 3,000 lions as against 1,800 that were. Now, I'm not saying these figures are absolutely sacrosanct.
Tigers, not lions.
Okay, right. Lions, most important. The lions started being protected from 1879 through the administrations of 3 Nawabs of Junagadh. Then United State of Saurashtra, then government of Bombay State, then government of Gujarat and government of India. 150 years it has taken to increase the number of lions, which is supposed to be a few left in 1900. Today you have 700 lions. So this is a long-term project.
I fully agree with you. I mean, even the elephant populations have been watching for more than 4 decades. The populations have increased overall.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a long-term project. So if we have some hiccups to start with, I don't think that should make us despondent and say, look, this is not going to work, it's going to fail.
Right. I agree with you. I mean, in terms of the larger mammals, we have done, I think, exceedingly well in terms of when it comes to population, increase in population of many species that otherwise could have, been threatened or even gone to extinction. I agree with you on that
it's to be said to the credit of our government and our people that in spite of us being 1.4 billion or God knows how many, we have not lost a single large mammal since independence except for the cheetah. So why not bring it back?
In fact, there are papers you would be, amazed to learn that the last 100,000 years of vertebrate extinction, the Indian subcontinent, South Asia, ranks along with Africa as having the least amount of extinctions. Over 100,000 years of early, hominin and then later modern human occupation of South Asia. Anyhow, that's a different subject altogether. But it's been a very long journey, Dr. Divyabhanusinh, and from your narrative, I knew that this journey actually started, with various people, including yourself, several decades ago.
That's right.
And, your early book, there are other, players in this who, were advocates for bringing the cheetah back into India, and you have been the strongest champion of this, especially through your book. Others have spoken a lot about it, but not written in such an engaging manner and interesting manner, and such a well illustrated book that you have brought out. I look forward to reading it in much greater detail, and at the same time, I hope that all of us should wish definitely that the project is a success. Now that we are plunged into it, we have brought the cheetah from Africa to India, and we don't want to let it go, so easily. We should all work together to ensure that the reintroduction project becomes a success, and the cheetah continues to, sort of survives in India, and that common man can actually go and see the cheetah in India. I must also share with you that I'm just off to Africa in a couple of days, and I'll probably go and see the African cheetah there. But
you must.
I like to see the cheetah. I like to see the cheetah in India one of these days. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Divyabhanusinh. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation, and I really enjoyed every part of it. Primarily because one seems to have a feeling of despondency when it comes to the species survival in the world. You feel so many things are getting extinct and all that, you get worried. But this has really given a lot of things to cheer about. And the efforts that are required and that we need to keep going on. And that India has been able to preserve so many of its species and really do a lot of things for the great mammals. It's really wonderful to hear all this. In fact, there are actually there are not many questions at all, but one comment is that incredibly interesting discourse, which I think it was indeed a very interesting discourse. A lot of information, enlightening a lot of people about the cheetah itself and its history. A lot of very interesting vignettes have come out. And I'm really hoping that people will buy the book. The URL has been given in the chat box. And we hope that people will read the book and do their bit for preserving this beautiful mammal. And we hope that this has been a very good platform to send this message across. I'm really thankful to Dr. Divyabhanusinh for having written this book. with all the painstaking effort that it takes to write a long-term research on this and to bring out this kind of a book. And for Professor Raman Sukumar to have taken us through the entire gamut of issues that are posed in the book in such an engaging manner. This was a conversation that has been held in such a wonderful flow, going from one topic to the other with such ease. I'm really thankful to both of you for letting us be privy to this beautiful conversation. Thank you so very much. And I really hope that people will heed your advice and do something about this. Experts or no experts, I think everybody needs to read this book. Thank you so very much. And I also thank not only on behalf of the Hyderabad Literary Festival, but also on Marg, who have brought out such a beautiful book. Thank you so very much for being with us. And I would like to remind our viewers that this recording, in case you have missed part of it or want to view it again later, it will be available forever on our channel. So anytime you want to see this, it will be a reference for you. You can come back to it and listen to it and seek more enlightenment from the recording. Thank you so very much for your presence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kineria. And Dr. Sukumar, wish you all the best in Amboseli.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an
very much.
important meeting you're attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you.